are listening to Jazz Brothers. They're playing Sugarcane from their 2009 release, Into the Night. This track and all the other music you'll hear on the show today are my original compositions. So I hope you like them. All right. Speaking of talking to different artists and interviewing folks, fortunately, I've had a great opportunity with all these different workshops and the different artists that I've had a chance to interact with, to talk to them and try to learn as much as I can from them. And I always, whenever I feel that it's appropriate, when I have a chance, I always ask them at least two specific questions. The first one being, what are you working on? And are you practicing? And, it's not always necessarily appropriate for every one of these players that I've met with or had a chance to talk to, but it usually is. So I try to ask them. Bobby Watson. What was Bobby's response? Well, Bobby simply said, hey man, I'm playing my horn every day, which is a good thing. Diego Figueiredo, an exceptional fingerstyle classical Latin guitar player I had the privilege of working with on a workshop. Diego says, very common theme, I'm not practicing. I wish I had time to, but I am performing 5 or 6 nights a week. So, and so then when you ask Diego a little deeper during the workshop, then he will say, as a lot of them do, is, yeah, earlier when I was younger, I practiced between 6 and 8 hours a day for many days, but now I don't have time to do that. I wish I did. So it's a recurring theme. Antonio Sanchez, one of today's most up-and-coming, brilliant drummers from New York City, had a concert here in Bend, and he needed a good piano, so they used my Yamaha electric piano for the gig, and so I was able to go to the show and sit close to Antonio, watch him, check out his grip, see if he's playing thumbs up, palms down, all those good drummer things. And of course, I had a chance to talk to Antonio, and I said, so Antonio, what are you working on? And he says, well, right now I'm working on preparing the music for our next world tour. I'm the musical director. We've got 3 more dates on this leg, and then we go back to New York for a week, and then we go out to Japan. So that's all I'm focusing on right now, is trying to get the music ready for the group tour. And I said, well, then how about practicing? And he says, well, I'm not practicing. I wish I would. I wish I could, but I do not have time to practice. However, just got a place in New York that has a basement in the home, and when I'm home on tour, I will be able to set up my drums and actually practice my drums. Because what we don't realize in living in places like Bend, Oregon, is that if you live in New York City or Chicago or even Los Angeles, it's not just as simple as going and playing your drums or practicing. Many people have to live in apartments. They have their instruments stored in storage units. So it's not as simple as going into your bedroom or out to the garage to play your drums and work on things. So that was Antonio's response. Bernard Purdie, arguably the single most recorded drummer in history, and a super nice guy that lives up to his reputation 150%. I had the wonderful opportunity of doing a workshop with Bernard, and I asked Bernard what he was working on and what he was doing, and he said, I have 3 album projects lined up back to back that I'm working on. And I'm not practicing. I never have a chance to practice anymore, but I'm just playing the groove and staying in the groove. And George, by the way, I absolutely love your drum set that you loaned me for the shows. Thank you very much. Yeah, Bernard got here, hated the drums that they had for him, and so he had heard about my early 80s Gretsch set, so called me up. I loaned him my drums, and he was also so kind as to have one of my students from the workshop get up and sit in with him, C.J. Neary, play some violin with him. So we've actually got a little project that we're working on together. So that's been fun. Really, really nice man. Brian Blade. If you know who of Brian, he is again one of the very, very top drummers in the world these days. Extremely busy. Brian, I see. I don't even remember who Brian was playing with, but he flew in from New Orleans to play one of the shows at the Oxford, and got in for the sound check Friday. Opened up his gig bag and did not have his bass drum pedal with him. He needed one within about a half hour or 45 minutes. So the producer of the show, Marshall Glickman, called me and he says, George, Brian needs a foot pedal, and do you have one that he can borrow? And I said, well, what kind of pedal is he playing? And he said he would love it if there was a DW chain drive. I don't know what that means, but I said, have one in the garage and I'll bring it down to him. So brought it down to loan it to Brian, and of course that gave me the opportunity to speak with him and develop a bit of a relationship. Again, really, really nice gentleman, wonderful man. I asked him, what are you working on? Are you practicing? Again, Brian Blade. I wish I was practicing. I wish I had time to practice. But when I get home from this tour, I'll have a chance. I'll have 2 or 3 days to set up and my drums and do some practicing. Right now, I'm really just working on execution. So, in other words, Brian Blade at the top of the drumming pyramid is still working on doing what he knows how to do and doing it well. Again, Brian, what a really nice cat. I was in the middle of a drum designing and building project right at that time. So I asked Brian if he would be so kind as to take a look at some of the sticks I was working on. He said, I'll be back for another show in your market in 30 days, and if you have some for me, I'd be happy to. So he came back with his own group project, I think it was. I'm sorry, Brian, I can't remember what it was. But out at the Sisters Folk Festival, went out and met with Brian, took him some sticks, some rather unusual sticks that we've been designing and working on, and he told me, literally, I'm on tour, but I'll be back home in about 120 days, and I'll have a chance to check your sticks out then. So, you know, guys like that are out touring the world, you hear a lot of things from a lot of people, but I'll tell you what, Brian Blade, what a gentleman. Almost to the day, about 125 days, 130 days later, I get an email from Brian. George, I played the sticks that you left me. You left me 3 pair. The Bowie Long Ride I really like. The second stick I really like. The third one I think another drummer might appreciate more. What a nice way of saying he didn't like those. That's great. So anyway, you get a common theme from the best in the world is that they just don't have time to work on things. So you get the basics going, and here is what you have to stay with. If you're a young player, now is the time to practice. The younger you are, the more time you have to practice, because the better you get and the older you get, the more life takes over, the more responsibilities you have, and the less time you have to practice. So you want to get as much in. If you're serious about being a professional or being serious about playing to the best of your ability, you have to practice and spend as much time as possible on your instrument at an early age. Now, this seems rather obvious because the natural comparison, the greatest analogy is between our musical instruments, the work on our musical instruments, and athletics and sports. I have a drum student, Stephen, a fine young drummer who is doing very well, who informed me that we were going to need to change our lesson times because, football warm-up practice season is started already, even though it's the beginning of the summer. And he's going to play football next fall in school. Great. So they are doing daily doubles, which means they practice in the morning for an hour and a half, and then they come back and do it again at the end of the day. So I went through the math with Stephen, and what did we come up with? I think we came up with about about 15 hours a week of football practice to be ready to go to play football and then really put the practice together when the fall starts. And so I asked him, do those 15 hours a week, are those helping you? Those help you quite a bit on your work for your practice? And he goes, oh yeah, helps everybody. So then of course, the question coming was, so how much better you think you'd be on your instrument if you were to do an additional 15 hours a week of practice? Wow, hadn't really thought of it that way, but a lot better. So you might take a look at that, especially young people. Now is your time. Get that instrument inside you now, because later on you'll need it and you won't have time to learn what you don't know then. So until next time, I'll say goodbye to you and to the old dog next door.